so many times in our life, we're following God and we're doing what is right, but we're seeing promises not come to pass, or we're seeing hard things come and happen to us. And we're like, Lord, what is going on? Why is this happening? And I think we all have walked through things in life where things have happened and they've been very difficult. And we've turned to God and questioned. Number one, we've said, God, where are you? Or difficult times come. And then even during the difficult times, we stop hearing God's voice. And it's like a double whammy, because now we're going through something difficult and we're not hearing God. And so I believe that because of obedience and submission, a lot of times because we're not submitted unto God the way we should be, we're not obedient the way we should be, we get ourselves into trouble. A lot of the times it's us making a wrong decision. And because the Bible says we reap what we sow, which like that can be really, really good or really, really scary, depending on what you're sowing, because that's what you're going to reap. So, I like to think of Abraham, how God promised him and said, I'm going to give you a son. And Abraham took that and was obedient to that and said, okay, I believe you. So the first step, he believed the word of the Lord. But then Sarah talked to him and was like, this isn't happening. Just go with my handmaiden. So he ends up getting with Hagar. And the Bible, it's interesting because so Abraham believed the word of the Lord, but wasn't fully submitted to God's will, because full submission to God's will would be obviously conceiving with his wife.
Yeah, and being like, dude, what are you doing? This is a horrible idea. This is not what God said.
Yeah, that you should know, like, you're conceiving with your wife, but because he wasn't submitted fully to the word and wasn't obedient to the nature of God, he took it in his own hands. So he heard right. So a lot of times, guys, we hear right, but we act according to our will. So we take what we hear from God and we make it come to pass however we can. A lot of people say, don't birth an Ishmael. You've probably heard that before. And that's wonderful advice, because a lot of us will get into our own strength and want to birth an Ishmael. So Abraham goes into Hagar, they conceive a child, and God doesn't speak to Abraham for 13 years. There's no record of him coming and speaking again to Abraham until he conceives with Sarah 13 years later and has Isaac. And 13 is the number of rebellion. I want to talk about the number 13 just a second, give you a little way God was speaking to me through the number 13 about rebellion, because ultimately Abraham was rebellious and went into Hagar and had Ishmael. And I remember I used to go to the gym a lot. It was kind of like my mission field. Like God would have me practice giving words to complete strangers. When I was on the treadmill, the Lord would speak to me. And, it was kind of like my little training ground, years and years ago. And I love that season with God, but I wasn't completely free of listening to like rap music. That's what I like to listen to when I would run, is like hype rap music. And I would run and I would count the number of songs within the time, because any runners that are listening to this understand this. You have to get your mind off of running. If you're focused on running, you'll not run very far. You have to distract yourself when you're running, because it's a mind game. A lot of running is a mind game. So day after day, I would go to the gym and I'd always end on rap song number 13. And this was a mix of all different songs from, different streaming platforms. It wasn't like the same playlist. It would play random songs, and I would always count.
And was it called 13, or was it number 13 in a
number
list?
13 amount of songs? So I would run for 13 songs, but I was only counting the songs because I would run for a certain amount of time. And so in the time, when the time was up, I would hit stop. But I would count the songs to help distract me, like, because you just have to get out of your head when you're running. And so each time I would be done, even though the songs were different all the time, the number I would count was always 13.
Interesting.
And I knew after a couple weeks of that, like, I'm slow to understand. This was, before I started really getting deep into the things of the Lord. Finally, one day I was like, when I started hearing God more clear, I was like, oh my gosh, Lord, you're speaking to me. Like 13 is the number of rebellion. And this music is very rebellious of me to listen to, because it wasn't good music. It was, a lot of times rap songs can be dirty and really not good. So the Lord dealt with me with the number 13 and by saying, like, Kelsey, you're rebellious by listening to this. This is not what I want you to listen to. And so God didn't speak to Abraham for 13 years. And then finally after that, he spoke to him and he had Isaac with Sarah. And God doesn't have to speak to us. That's something I just want to say to everyone listening, is God doesn't have to speak to you whenever you desire it. God is a God of justice and a God of righteousness, and he sticks to his word. And so if you're reaping any type of rebellion to what God's instructed you, and rebellion looks like many things, but one of the things rebellion looks like is taking a promise from God and trying to make it happen in your own strength. It's rebellion, because you're going against what the Lord has for you. And you're saying, okay, I know better. I know better than God. So I can work this out, and and what happens is it never works out. You always birth an Ishmael. And then you're like, why did I do this? Or God had a better blessing for you that you didn't run into because you took it into your own hands.
Oh man.